Yeah, I come from men that stand. I'm in the field and you just sit in the stands. Take that bass out your voice. If you ain't got no gun in your hand, I do what I want. And you don't even do what you can, you do what you told. I got no love for my foes. They can mimic my delivery and copy my prose. But what they can't comprehend is how I stick to this code. It's either in you or not. It's not the kicks and the clothes. They ain't cut from the same cloth. Can't come from the same loom. Fit in similar shapes or even sit in the same room. Confusing authenticity with part of the costume. I'm teaching gifted children. You can't come in this classroom.
Dare to struggle, dare to win.
Welcome back. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Sorry, we're a little bit late. My bad.
My bad. It's my fault. You can tell them.
It's a bunch of other technical issues I was trying to get myself to. But how you doing?
I'm good. Just had a dope therapy session. Been having a pretty cool first week at my new job. So it's been real interesting. Real interesting.
Hey, listen, I want to welcome y'all to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win. You're going to get some Black radical politics. From CMB's standpoint, we have 2 Atlanta chapter members. Yusef, he'll be coming in a little bit soon, possibly. And we're here on Black Liberation Media, the only network where you can get some real Black or radical dope shit, content, journalism, all that other stuff. But normally we are mostly in the room with a bunch of politicized people. So what we need y'all to do is copy the link, share it to some person who need to be politicized, especially somebody who be on that anti-China shit, right? I think this conversation is going to yield a very interesting dynamic around some of the propaganda that we all are faced with. So pretty soon we'll be joined by CJ to have that conversation about some of the online dialogue around China, US, and other things. But before we get there, like, what you got going on, Cherie? I think I been thinking about Safia Bakari's again. This concept of no investigation, no right to speak. There's a lot of like online conversation. There's a lot of people who are credible on things that don't do as much as investigation, but also internal organizations. There's always conflict that a lot of times start by unprincipled stuff, and there's very little investigation. So I kind of thought about that first, but I don't know if you got anything else on your mind. I mean, you can read the passage.
Yeah, I think that's. Yeah, I think that's a heavy thing. And then I think I just been thinking about, ever since this last Saturday's with Renee episode, I've been thinking about dialectical materialism and the overall material contradictions. I think is messing up a lot of people when it comes to either the online left and even sometimes, us organizing offline. And I think a lot of it is, coming up between seeing the stuff online and then just even me working this corporate job and just understanding how deep, just so many things contradict sometimes, like who I am politically versus where I work, and just like these contradictions definitely just really make me think a lot. And I'm still getting an understanding of what dialectical materialism is, so I may not be describing it correctly, but I'm just kind of going off of the episode of Saturdays with Renee, which I probably need to watch again to understand what the guest was talking more about. But I do think in work and and being who I am, I've just been thinking more about like just the contradiction, but then just how there's always this contradiction because we live in this crazy empire, and how just the complications of that. So, and I think that also ties into how we receive media and how we receive, information as well. Yeah,
I think we were having a conversation earlier about historical dialectical materialism and being able to look at trends in history in the past and allow it to better explain the present and see how things continue. Oftentimes we're in spaces where, and I've told you this before, there's a phrase of there's like opportunism, and then there's something that I was trying to figure out what I would call a rush to uncritical justice, where people are not maybe necessarily intentionally engage in opportunism, but because of systems of oppression, they want justice, and they will rather give out that idea of justice without even doing any of the investigation, without even doing any of the fact checking or whatever. So somebody could be like, Cherie, somebody say you blah blah blah, and again, you will go, instead of investigating or questioning or whatever, you will just automatically go to a particular conclusion. And I think that allows us to evade actually principal conflict and talk about things. But one of the things that, even as I think about Safia's work, right, before she even get into this argument around no investigation, no right to speak, there's a passage in her Between Enemies and Friends book. You can read it in The War Before. It says, we often assume that because we all say we are involved in the struggle, we mean we are involved in the same struggle with the same objectives and goals. Here's what I mean by that phrase. I believe that nothing short of a revolution will eradicate the racism, capitalism, and imperialism that oppress me and my people, as well as our other exploited people and oppressed people everywhere. I believe that the capitalist system of this country has to be destroyed and replaced with an economic system built on the premise from each according to his ability to each according to his need. That is, every man, woman, and child contributes to the whole what he or she is capable of contributing. And whatever that contribution is, highly skilled labor or unskilled labor, each receives from the whole the basic necessities of life. So again, she's kind of talking about like the struggle, and clearly on what she means by the struggle, right? And then, but when you get to, this conflict around enemies and friends, like there's the primary contradictions. In our spaces, people could be brought into a thing and they can be meaning well, but they're into a thing that is nefarious. And so all the work that they can do could be nefarious, and you don't really have a problem with the person, but the system, and the person has take on that identity in that system. And sometimes you have to have conflict with those people who upholding the system knowingly or unknowingly. So she's talking between friends and enemies. Like, are the people we in conflict enemies or friends? And then again, it's like that argument, like it's a principal rule that if you're going to be in conflict, there should be this culture setting of like, yo, and before we speak on something or say something, there should be like a thorough investigation. If not, culturally, we should be like, you're not a credible source. And last thing, that might even help us engage with celebrities in a particular way, where we know that if Nard is talking about scientific socialism, he haven't done any investigation, so he shouldn't be somebody that we look to, and we shouldn't be quoting, oh, I heard on social media and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I'm sorry, that was a long minute.
No, I think it definitely, and I think it all ties back to actual process. And I think even as I am learning and understanding dialectical materialism, I think it's allowing me to understand that a process, or having a process for something, is not the same as being neoliberal. And I think a lot of people, the way we engage with the world, it's very hard to find those lines for a lot of people. And I think about that, like Kwame Ture quote, when he's like, just because I'm like a slave doesn't mean I love slavery. Just because I'm picking the cotton doesn't mean I have to like be pro-slavery. Like, as I'm picking the cotton, I'm constantly thinking about how to get out, or what is the next thing, or what is, that doesn't mean I necessarily, am siding with it, but I understand because of the empire, because of the because like this is the state that I'm in, and I can't expect to just up and change that in like one night, or like you get. And I think even with that, like, it's caused this inner reflection for me, because I'm just like, yeah, I work this job that's super capitalistic. I work in a tech industry that, honestly, and I hate to say it to a lot of anti-AI people, but AI is everywhere at this point. Like, and I just being deep in the tech industry and like having to go through all these different, I'm like, there's no way to boycott it as a person, right? Because my company, is tied to all of these different entities and all these different brands and stores. And so if my company is tied to those things, right, and all these companies are utilizing it, then all these companies are spending hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars to continue this AI thing, which I know is harming the environment. And I think me being the radical person that I am, that's a contradiction for me. I'm just like, I'm thankful to have a job or whatever, but I don't have to love the job or, feel like, oh, because of that, I'm protecting it. But like, as I'm at this job, I'm just thinking of like, like I said, me having even buying power was brought up in one of my meetings the other day. And I just was kind of smiling to myself in the way that it was brought up. And I'm sorry if I'm going over, but the way that it was brought up was funny to me because they were talking about Gen Z's buying power. Like the guy who was leading the meeting was talking about, but it kind of made me think even further about the like how buying power isn't like a real thing, because we're a marketing team, right? My company's like a tech marketing team. And like, he's literally using this whole Gen Z's buying power as a selling point to all of these different, consumer brands, as like, you should use our product to get, more AI information on how the Gen Z shoppers are shopping and their buying power. So it's just interesting to me. Like, I'm at this job and obviously I'm trying to figure out, how to do the job right. But because I am who I am, I'm seeing all these things that are making it even clearer of like, the BS, the political BS outside of that. And so I was just kind of like, aha, but yeah, I don't know. So I've just been thinking about that, with this job and how it just contradicts everything. And my job before contradicted everything as well. But, this, still very much, the deeper tech gets into AI, it's just going to be more contradictory. But, like I said, not that I'm trying to obviously become a big AI influencer or whatever, but this is what, I'm doing at the time. And, obviously I'm trying to think about, well, what is next for me in this circumstance? But yeah, so I don't know. So it's definitely, I think the dialectical materialism stuff is hard, because I feel like I'm a liberal or a fake sometimes working this job, but I don't know. It's just this contradiction, I guess. So,
well, I think so.
But sorry, but I know the job, it won't stop until the revolution happens.
Promotion, right? One promotion this week.
Oh, sorry.
End of this month, we have Brian Colby coming.
My bad. It's behind. Oh. It's behind, so I'm talking over you. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay,
so
yeah.
Okay, so the end of this month, Brian Colby will be in Atlanta, and the reason why I mentioned that, one, because promotion, but for two, next month, Jennifer Black, who co-wrote a book with Mumia, or co-edited a book with Mumia, will be in town in the next month, and is an anti-prison reader. And I think your point was like, well, I'm in capitalism and I'm participating, and I think reading Frederick Douglass' letter when he was captured after trying to escape kind of lets you kind of grapple with, like, you're a victim of capitalism, and you're a victim of a government who social order is to force people to exploit their labor, to receive a little bit of fiat in order to pay for their basic needs and hoard all of the resources. Like, so that environment is like, you have to engage in a particular system in a way to survive, and part of your survival is, again, selling your labor, right? You have to sell your labor in order to actually meet some of the basic needs, not live lavishly, but meet some of your basic needs. And I feel like, again, most people who are talking about capitalism, I think it's probably wise for us to be engaged in more understanding of capitalism, because I don't think most of us do. But yeah, so I think that probably will lead us into a point. I don't know if CJ is ready yet, but that lead us to a point of like, when other countries have decided to move in a particular way, what this dying capitalist nation would have to do in relation to them to delegitimize their efforts to actually create livable environments for people. But I see my brother's ready, so I'm gonna hit the transition button, and we'll get right in with our guests. So y'all stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
I'm throwing copper at the coppers, but I'm shaking like Morocco. Say my prayers with the pistol, serve the sinners with the chopper. All my buddies got it from scratch. My house had Betty Crocker. His mama owned D. He ain't even get no shot of. Profit is invisible. Profit come from product. He thinking buffet. He can't comprehend no potluck. God bless the child with his own powder to rock.
Hey, CJ.
Hello.
Happy to have you back on. So basically, yeah, this conversation sprung from, I took a whole break from TikTok, honestly, all of August. I come back on and I had to catch up. And I realized there's this huge war on TikTok with the online left, people, both sides, people that I follow, about China and if China is imperialist or not, if China is harming Africa or not. And TikTok to me is just not a place to have discourse. It's all about everybody trying to one up this person's followers, you know, big up in you and you bring in the, it just isn't a place for like actual conversation discourse when people have come to two different conclusions on it and how we can just actually have actual discourse. So, you know, so the battle is, like I said, about that. So I wanted to have CJ on because, I mean, for the first time, I didn't agree with CJ. So I was like, oh no. But like I said, rather than making a whole post or video and attempting to cook him, CJ. So I was like, let's have him on and just talk about this because, you know, I'm, you know, like I said, still kind of getting a better understanding of it. Obviously, I have a place where I feel like I stand on the relationship of Africa and China, but I thought, you know, having this dialogue to me was important. So yeah, I don't know if I should ask my first question first. If Geechee, you wanted to hop in or
no, I mean, welcome back, CJ. Want to see how you doing and what's going on, and then yeah, Cherie, you can get into your question.
I'm good.
Yeah, well, I guess my question is because I think studying what I know about China and geopolitical, you know, politics, I think I've come to the conclusion, the same way I come to my own conclusion when it comes to my contradictions, is that, you know, this is a process when it comes to the liberation of places like Africa, when it comes to, yeah, everything has a process, and it's not to overlook the things that China may not be doing the best way or great, but I just kind of see it as a process. And I think with the online left, to me, from observing, it seems like, yeah, that there's not a distinction between true neoliberalism and colonialism and what we on the ground would call non-reformist reform or, you know, organized struggle. And I guess I want to ask you, do you see a difference between non-reformist reform, neoliberalism, and organized struggle? And what would those differences be if you do see those differences, or do you not see those kind of distinctions and things?
I think when it pertains to, are we talking about in the context of China? Or just
I mean, you can say overall, but you can, you know, bring it back to China. Yeah.
So are you asking me like what does it look like reform basically and revolution? Or are you asking me the differences between that and how does that work with organized struggle?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to ask is like, do you have certain things, whether it comes to like personally or just overall geopolitical, that you would be able to be like, that's not neoliberalism, that is a process of organized struggle or a process of non-reformist reform? Or do you just kind of think that there's no such thing as that really?
I think on a geopolitical scale, we don't see a real organized struggle for agitation to overthrow capitalism. That's mainly what I see. I see a lot of complacency with the system as is, and it's not as much agitation in a way. I think George Jackson talks about this in Blood in My Eye. He talks about the thing of property relations. And if you do not overthrow the state of property relations as we know it under capitalism, because capitalism is not just private ownership, you know what I'm saying? It's free market capitalism. This is something that China participates in. As long as we have these property relations, as long as we have private ownership, as long as we have a detachment and alienation from labor, this is reform. You know what I'm saying? If you're not overthrowing this system, if you're not agitating for the system's overthrow, you basically just have a reform of capitalism, which is re-legitimizing the system again, just in a different form. And when it comes to China participating on a free market, you see that Chinese companies such as Freeport, Huawei, you see Taiwanese companies like Foxconn within the PRC, People's Republic of China, and it's just a whole bunch of stuff with that I'll probably get into. But I believe as long as you do not see for the agitation or overthrow of capital, I don't really see an organized struggle against that being conducted through China, through things like BRICS. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, you answered it. Yeah, I don't know if Geechee wants to follow up.
Yeah, so I think I don't know if the process is answered there. So to overthrow capitalism, which none of us have done, it's not just like it's overthrow and then things are gone, but it's like a process. So let's give an example, like Nicaragua was able to get Somoza out of it, right? And once Somoza was gone, the Sandinistas was in power. Well, this is a geopolitical context. So with being in power and there's a world trade, the U.S. can put sanctions on your country very easily, like Cuba and IO. So your method of development might be impacted, right? And so once the folks couldn't develop as fast as they want and they didn't have access to particular world markets, they voted the Sandinista out, put Chamorro in for a little while, and realized that private property and private shit just expanded again. And then the revolution came back and nationalized industries again. So I want to hear more about what you think the process is to overthrow capitalism. And again, maybe to the point, like what is the process? And then maybe, I know this is probably a bigger question, but then I'm thinking the conversation might be around like U.S. imperialism as opposed to capitalism. So what is China doing imperialism, or is China doing whatever they makeshift do to survive and be a world power? So
okay, so I believe in global revolution, so global through intercommunalism, through communist powers for the overthrow of capitalism within their respective regions, which is going to destabilize the world. So for example, one of the what happens when you have socialism or the agitation of socialism just in one country, what happens is, you talk about the sanctions and the embargoes, the capitalist powers of the world constrict you. And you know what I'm saying? They constrict you to a point of where you have to adopt state capitalism, in which the state is the arbiter of everything now. And you still have you still have markets and things like that, but you may plan out your capitalism more because you have not fully abolished the thing known as capital. And so you see after this, like with Lenin in the USSR, Lenin had to retreat. This is what he calls the NEP. He has to retreat and he has to go back, because he realizes the revolution in Germany didn't pop off. So the overthrow of capital within the imperial cores has not been met, which causes countries to go into submission. They can start to build socialism, but they hit that roadblock, and capitalism's coercion on the geopolitical scale subordinates them to a place of having to be coerced, because I think Cuba now has 9% market privatization. They had to open their market up somewhat to capital. So it's one of those things of that this would just have to be a sustained global effort for the overthrow of capital through communalism, intercommunalism, through support networks of communists, anarchists, Marxists, et cetera, et cetera.
Cherie, I don't know if you had something. You on mute, Cherie.
My bad. I didn't know you had anything clarifying to ask, Geechee. But I guess for me, so at this point, you do define China as imperialist. I'm asking. And so I just want to know kind of what would be your breakdown on why China is imperialist.
Okay. So it's just using dialectical materialism, using a historical lens to lay the groundwork. So you have, after Mao's death in 1976, you have a disturbance within the CPC/CPC. You know what I'm saying? That's the governing body, the ruling, the Chinese Communist Party. After this, after Mao comes Deng Xiaoping. And when Deng Xiaoping rises to power, he's like, okay, we're going to open up our economy. We're going to open up China's economy to the market sector, to private capital, to private business owners. You know what I'm saying? We're going to allow them to come in. We're going to allow them to come into China. And what Marx teaches us, what a lot of communist thinkers, what a lot of socialist thinkers teach us is once capital has invaded your state, capital will now predominate your state, and it will inherently have to influence the politics of how your state conducts itself. So after this is when Deng Xiaoping opens market reforms. He makes 50% of China's economy market capitalist, and he makes the other 50% state-owned. And what ends up happening is after this, you start to see the privatization. This is why you have McDonald's in China. Because China is now partaking in this global enterprise of capital. So you start to see in 2001, Zhang Luoxi, who is an original member of the CCP, fought on the Liberation Front with Mao Zedong and all of that. He submits his withdrawal from the party. He does this because Jiang Zemin, who is the general secretary of the party, in 2001 decrees that capitalist business owners, capitalist roaders can now get admitted into a Chinese Communist Party. This is something that Kwame Ture even touches on, that socialism and capitalism are diametrically opposed to one another. You cannot have a capitalist working in the best interest of the worker because the worker is the one being exploited in this relationship, is the victim. The capitalist has declared war on the worker by exploiting and alienating its labor. So once you start to already see the existence of capitalists within China, and now you see capitalists within the CCP, CPC, you start to see China's building up of its imperial network. So one of the places that China set up its imperial network in the 2000s was in the DRC through one of the prime ministers named Joseph Kabila, who's the son of Laurent Kabila in the DRC. So what you see here is Laurent Kabila was killed by his bodyguard. You see Joseph Kabila start taking Chinese finance capital. This is another hallmark of imperialism, where you're able to influence another country's politics because of your finance capital. This is another hallmark of imperialism. And what ends up happening is Joseph Kabila ends up getting, I believe it's millions, billions of dollars in finance capital from Chinese investors that go into an offshore bank that he owns in Gabon. So what ends up happening is that the United States has no U.S. based mines in the DRC anymore because Freeport sold to CMOC, which is China Millennium Limited, which is responsible for 1/3 of the cobalt supply in the world. It's a Chinese state-owned enterprise. So what ends up happening is Joseph Kabila shifts the mining sector to Chinese hands within the DRC. And now today you see within the DRC that China has a monopoly on the mining sector, has a monopoly inside the country. They own 80% of the industrial mines, and China is also responsible for 75% of the refined cobalt that comes out of the world. Because this is a process on the ever-linking chain that is mining within the DRC, because you start with your artisanal miners. So these are the people who are in the mines, and these are the people who are dying in the mines, children, men, women. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people have to take their kids. It's a system of enslavement, really. And what ends up happening is they then go to a negotiator. 30% are Chinese nationals, or it may be somebody from a Congolese state-owned enterprise. After it goes to negotiator, that's when it goes to the industrial sector. It's key. China owns 80% of the industrial sector in the DRC. And then after this is when it goes to a refinery. This is when the cobalt gets refined and other minerals get refined. And then this is when you go to your battery manufacturers. And then this is when it goes into your electric vehicles. And this, if you look it up, Huawei is one of the biggest benefactors. It's Apple, Google, Huawei, and Samsung. These are some of the biggest benefactors of this system of exploitation. You can find all of this out in Red Cobalt by Sahar Hakara. One of the biggest benefactors from all of this, I believe Huawei's revenue last year was $860 billion. And then you see the operating budget of the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, is $7.2 billion.
So there was a lot said there, and I probably disagree with 60% of it, but I think this conversation is probably not. I know we just talked about how hard it is to have a conversation on social media, but probably in the span of time that we have, I think we could talk more, and then maybe even invite you back in the future to talk with folks. I know there's a few comrades that who specifically focus on China can have some things, but I kind of want to back up a little bit. Like you said something about socialist thinkers and then communist thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you could do two things with the information that you have on China, maybe share some like your sources of investigation. We kind of talked about that earlier, like what did you study to come to this conclusion? And then like, again, if you are a socialist thinker and socialist is taking particular state apparatus and doing a thing with it until you go into communism, maybe tell me like your understanding of the process from where we at now to socialist communism or anarchism, whatever it could be.
Okay, so Marx touches on this. He touches on the abandonment of all state mechanisms that existed under capital. So what you're going to have to do is, and this is something else that people don't realize, the experimentation for capitalism, it took over 800 experiments for capitalism to finally get to where it is today. You know what I'm saying? I believe that we have experimented, we have tried to agitate for socialism around the world. But as long as capitalism exists, there will be no socialism. So you asked one of the socialist writers, Kwame Ture. I think this is one of his speeches in 1972. It's a rally, it's a Pan-African conference in which he speaks on socialism and capitalism being diametrically opposed to one another. It's like, have you ever heard of like the magnetic fields? You can't connect the North Pole with the North Pole. You know what I'm saying? That's how it is. You cannot have, these things they're going to repel each other each and every time, because you cannot have exploitation and have socialism. Because socialism is a democratization of the workplace. You know what I'm saying? You can't have bosses, you can't have CEOs, you can't have billionaires under socialism. How does that work? China has over 300 billionaires, if I'm not mistaken. The CEO of TikTok, the ByteDance guy, he's worth $60 billion. How does this happen? Wealth accumulation. The accumulation of wealth is how they are able to be billionaires. Is this system of exploitation, because being a billionaire is inherently an exploitative relationship, because you're alienating the worker. And then you see also within China, you see sweatshops and all other type of things that were allowed under Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin, until you get things like the Jossic workers incident. Have you ever heard of that?
Well, I kind of want, so I'm hearing that, but I'm hearing like, I'm still not hearing like, okay, I'm saying all this because I either went here and studied or interacted with these groups, or I studied this, and this is where you can get that from. So,
okay.
And this is why I'm asking that, because sometimes when we're talking, like we can say these things, and it's hard to be like, okay, well, let's watch.
Okay, so are you asking who did I get the information about China's monopoly on the mining sector?
Sure, yeah. Let's start.
Okay, so Arthur Carter, have you ever read the book Cobalt Red?
Cobalt Red. I think that
how the flood of the Congo powers our lives.
I think that was in one of our group chats, but I haven't read it. No, I think people were talking about it.
So he's not a socialist, he's not a Marxist, he's not anything, but that I know of, he may be. But the book is one grand connection that connects the Congo's history of being an extraction site for the West and through Western colonialism, and how China has been able to slip his hand under and become one of the biggest benefactors of the settler colonial system that's still in the DRC. When it comes to the abolition of capital, you asking sources on that?
No, more so that part. Like, so Cobalt Red, let's start with there. Like, through Cobalt Red, you were able to conclude that China has a monopoly on African mines.
Yes,
and they're exploiting the workers and those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's China, not individuals from China, but China government.
Yes, state-owned enterprises. Yeah, state-owned enterprises.
Okay.
So it's not even that, because even within Western imperialism, you find privatized ownership. You find Western imperial projects that are, you know what I'm saying? That's what enslavement was driven by. It was driven by companies. The Virginia Company, privatized corporations who were dispatched, given capital to go out and make neo-colonies. And this is why you hear China building railways and things and other things of that nature. That is a part of the imperial projects when you go there, because these people aren't reaping any benefit. The average Congolese citizen is not. The Congolese proletarian is being alienated from their labor by Chinese state-owned enterprises. This is the capitalism. This is the imperialism that I'm referring to.
Hello? Yeah, sorry. I you put a lot out there. I'm trying to think of my next question. Honestly, I still haven't really come up with one. I didn't know if Geechee had anything that he wanted to ask again. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of something that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Marx in the manifesto states, we should not hush up to class antagonisms. We should not concede to them. We should seek to abolish them. We should not try to reform this existing society, but we should strive to create a new one. He says this in the manifesto, I believe.
Yeah, I guess for me, the question I have I'll go off of somebody in the chat. I think, what is it, Arwello? They were saying, didn't Marx say that each system grows in the womb of the previous?
I think in context, yes, but because like you can see the inklings of capitalism in the system of feudalism. This is one of his main arguments in the manifesto, that the feudal landlords were just replaced with capitalists. You know what I'm saying? Instead of the feudal landlord, you now have the capitalist who is doing the alienation of the labor. He's drawing the similarities between these systems. But when it comes to just a dialectical approach in the historical materialism, yes, capitalism was something that is just going to be more radical than feudalism. You get what I'm saying? So you see the birth of capitalism within feudalism, because you know capitalism without feudalism. So this is when then after this you have the abolition of capital, like you have the abolition of feudalism, and then after the abolition of capitalism you get socialism, and then on this string you get into your communism, anarchy, or whatever you want to call it.
Because I have not read Cobalt Red, and I think maybe it will be wise for you to for us to again engage the conversation. I do know that there was some conversation around the book. I can't remember. I would have to check back in our chat, because again, a book could share a particular thing, so it could teach us about like the death urge that we engage in technology in, but it doesn't necessarily have to also conclude, or it doesn't mean that it's also correct about a particular Chinese contracts with the countries. So I think it would be good for us again to maybe even start somewhere like that. Like if we were to do an online study group in real time or some type of in conversation, then you would be like, okay, this is a source, and now let's all examine the source, and then we can come up with find there. Because I mean, even if you search that on the line, there's already like critiques of Cobalt Red and all these other things.
Yeah, I've read them.
Yeah, which is important. So I think it's good for us to engage that from there. And I wouldn't, try to argue any of the critiques because I haven't read it or the critiques. So, but yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, did you read any of the critiques of it from Black Agenda Report or other left newsletters?
So I think Black Agenda Report actually dropped 2 articles about it. It dropped one called China and the Congo, in which it mentions it, and then it drops another one, which is from Open Society, if I'm not mistaken. That's one of the major critique of Cobalt Red is about Open Society, and it's basically saying that it is a white saviorship piece. And I was saying that I heavily disagree with that, because I believe most of the language and most of the it's to draw the vivid picture of what he is seeing, because the person who wrote Cobalt Red was he's Indian, if I'm not mistaken. He's an Indian independent journalist who actually went down to the DRC. You know what I'm saying? It's a firsthand account of the things that he's experiencing, the people he's encountering, what they're saying to him. And he's writing this down. He's writing his experiences in the book. So one of the things in the intro that captivated me was when he said that he's approaching a little boy who just passed away in an artisanal mine, and he's saying he was bleeding out. And he was like, this dirt is so red down here, it makes you wonder, is the dirt red from it being so exploited from the mining and all of this, or is the blood of the Congo red for having been spilled with blood for the past 500 years? The systems of Africans dying in these places has not ceased.
Yeah. So I got one more question as it relates to that. So it's obvious that we're here speaking in English, and a lot of times I guess the information that we get, I'm curious, one, what does that say about the US? And then why do you think the US has so much aggression propagandistically towards China? Because even some of the things that you are saying, like this is what the US would claim about China. So I'm curious, like, what do you think is the objective for the US coming at China in a particular way? China, the USSR, Cuba, and all those names. What do you think is the reason between that? And then, yeah, I'm curious what you think about some of the tactics that it might use to divide people who are against U.S. imperialist project, which China will be. But go ahead.
I think when it pertains to U.S. imperialism, it's a diametric sword. Because to me, I also say the State Department says China is communist. They're ruled by communists. This, you know what I'm saying? They'll say that. But I also say that the State Department most definitely knows the utility of the truth. So it will manipulate the truth. You know what I'm saying? It will tell you a half-baked explanation of what's going on. It will not tell you its hand in what's going on. So it's going to say, what the State Department is going to do is say, it was only China that did this in the DRC. You know what I'm saying? Even though the U.S. is in the East. You know what I'm saying? Funding Rwanda, which China does do defensive coordination with. They do defensive coordination with Rwanda, who's the vassal state of the United States, who's funding M23, which is a paramilitary group that's slaughtering African babies, men, women, and children right now as we speak, which is being funded by the United States war machine down in the DRC. And so this is what I'll say to people. China may not have the same historical bearings as the United States has had when it comes to imperialism, colonialism, neo-colonialism. One of the things that I may just in the next time we were able to speak is just pitch out there that China is a social imperialist power in its own regional in East Asia with countries like Bhutan and other things like that, in which basically the United States is just going to talk bad about imperial partners. We saw it with Canada. We saw it with Canada with Trump. I'm gonna make it the 51st state. All of these things is to make it look like these people are diametrically. It's the same thing Democrats and Republicans do about each other. Democrats talk bad about Republicans all day long, but at the end of the day, we can realize they still collude for Black subjugation and oppression. So I believe that as people who want to agitate against capitalism, we cannot just sit there and just get in a state of campism in which we say, okay, we're going to get finance capital from this imperial power, China, Russia, or whatever, you know what I'm saying, through things called like the Wagner Group. We're going to get finance capital. We're going to get our things from that instead of the West. But what I need people to understand is that when you're talking about capitalism, when you're talking about finance capital, when you're talking about all these things, they are corrupt from their root because capitalism is a corruptible, broken system. It's working as intended, but it is a corrupt, evil, racist system.
I mean, I think it's just so much to go into. I think I'm trying to figure out what is the argument and what is the conclusion, like how you should and shouldn't engage with China. But if you say like, I've never heard the argument is, oh, we should get resources to help build something from the West versus the East, right? So yeah, I'm just curious, like, okay, like even if this is true, right? Our enemy is the U.S. And it sounds like you might say that China ain't our friend, but
yeah, it's a historical fact.
Well, I don't know who that is. But what I'm saying is like you're saying, I'm talking about you today because I don't know historically everybody is saying. You're saying that you can't trust China. My question would be, okay, now what? Like, what you gonna do to fight U.S.? And then in terms of developing something, what do you think is going to be developed if you don't have any partners, even if you tactically use partners that are enemies of your enemy?
Yeah, so I believe as like people within the imperial core as leftists, it's a whole lot of stuff I probably cannot say on here. But we should build a system of intercommunalism in which we can talk to people within Africa so Africa can become self-sufficient. You get what I'm saying? Because one of the things that people don't understand is dumping more money, dumping more aid, dumping on or more of this is actually making the continent poor. Because they have black fascists in power that are the leaders of these countries within Africa, who siphon all of the wealth away from the people, in which you don't have a system within Africa. You don't have a system in which the government answers to the people whatsoever. You don't have, you know what I'm saying? You don't have that. You don't have people control governments. You just don't have that within Africa. What you have is a system of these leaders within Africa are being backed by foreign investors from France, United States, Britain, all of the West, China even too. I just talked about Joseph Kabila. So you have this system in which they don't care what the people are talking about. You see it within Kenya. They don't care what the people are talking about. They're going to be the black fascists that George Jackson talks about. The enemy from within. So I believe that it's really just up to us to start building programs here so we can support the brothers and sisters over there. Because the only people who I believe are the best fit to liberate black people is black people. I don't believe that you can get a nation state that is exploiting black people to agitate for our liberation just as much as I don't trust the State Department of the United States to agitate for the liberation of the black people. You have to have a system of intercommunalism to fight for your liberation, because your liberation won't be found there.
I'm sorry. So I think that's my point. Like you said, only we here can do that. And
not just central to us. I'm just talking about the diaspora in general.
Yeah, but even that, let's say it's a diaspora, where you're going to be utilized. Like for instance, all of y'all work in a particular environment where, and I think Cherie was just talking about this. You're going to get funds from trading your labor or some type of whatever to do and build something, right? So where are you going to get those funds from? Where are you going to get the resources from? How are you going to build resources? And how, like, what's the objective? If the U.S., I hope you think, is worse than China, or they equal whatever. Like, if you're lodged in the U.S., speaking English, using U.S. currency, what's the move?
What's the move?
Yeah, what's the move?
Asking me like, how do we just do things as a community? How do we get together and galvanize as a community, start dispersing our dollars and circulating those things to build up? Because one of the main things that people got funding from was by private, you know what I'm saying, corporations. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Businesses within the community. That's what I'm saying. So you're always going to have this stream of money that can possibly come in. But when the money gets turned off, what are you going to do? Who do you have to fall back on?
That's
you know what I'm saying? This is what I'm saying. It's just I believe it's an organization. I believe what we don't have enough is the organization to even do it. We can talk about it all day, but this is what I'm saying. This is one of the things that I'm trying to stress right now in my own life is getting out there, getting on the ground, making sure I'm a part of building, you know what I'm saying, these safety nets for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? The community gardens. What if the state says no? How are we going to eat?
Well, yo, trust me, I know.
To me, it's a process. We don't have the infrastructure right now. You get what I'm saying? We don't have the infrastructure right now. What I'm doing more is I'm critiquing and analyzing the problem. And you know what I'm saying? Do I have the perfect answer? Probably not. Do some other people have better answers than me? Probably yes.
I think you do have the perfect answer, and your perfect answer was it's a process, because it is a process. And I think understanding the process. So, for instance, most of those black businesses you talked about, they have white capital to prop
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We just don't have the infrastructure we did back in the day. So this is one of those things where we just have to set up. I just saw somebody in the chat say I'm arguing for black buying power. No, I'm not arguing for black capitalism.
You made an argument that sounds like, and I think
I'm not arguing for black capitalism. You know what I'm saying? Grassroots organizations that are black owned, you know what I'm saying, giving things like funds, giving things like food, giving things like shelter, group collaboration, you know what I'm saying, setting up detachments from the state so you don't have to depend on private businesses in the first place. You know what I'm saying? That could be an avenue, but not saying that is the end all be all. Not by
what I'm saying is the private businesses still links back to
that's the root of the problem.
No, let me finish. When you say like we can do these things and not have to depend on them, what I'm saying is all of the funds that you're going to get is coming from private business. Even our radical orgs, and if a person who family haven't been engaged in capitalism didn't donate a large sum of money, if the people who collectivize their money and donate to us didn't work for private companies, you wouldn't have the money anyway. So it's all going to trace back to blood money.
It's all going to trace back. That's the thing. The system. This is what I'm saying. We all are participants in the system. You get what I'm saying? We're all going to be participants in the system. You know what I'm saying? I transfer United States currency just like everybody else. But it's one of those things in which you find out what the problem is, and then you discern what is the best thing. I think this is another thing that's talked about: tactical relationships, into where you don't become dependent on the thing, but you use the thing to your best ability, and you use the thing to its tactical end. You get what I'm saying? You use it to your tactical end. You use the private business to the tactical end, and once they cut the water off, in which they will, so you already have something else built up. You have infrastructure built up that you can now fall back on. You can grow from that outside of the water that they just cut off.
I'm looking forward to our more conversations and study on that, because I agree.
Yeah.
And when you become a government and a world superpower who can use certain things to your tactical end, then you get critique for being the same as that same government. So I think, we have more to talk about. Cherie, I don't know if you have anything to wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I just think I feel like it circles back to, like if we understand that we don't have any that the buying power thing obviously isn't a real thing, that, Blacks in America or anywhere else don't have that way to circulate money or circulate dollars or anything. Like, we don't have that power to have that sort of influence. I think for me, it's just hard for me to see how we can't tactfully, and even Africa tactically, utilize some of the things that China is able to offer in order to create some sort of pathway. I think for me, I'm just trying to understand. To me, it is a process. And I think obviously, I mean, as you mentioned before, there are, because of the superpower of white hegemony, imperialism, a lot of these African leaders, still have that indoctrination, and even the people still have that indoctrination. But I think what a lot of people that are, Pan-African or for Pan-African socialism are saying is, maybe these places, because of where they are at politically, even with the partnerships with China, or whatever you want to call it, it may appear, or they may seem to have limits, I guess, in the progress that is happening when it comes to collective liberation. But it's only a reflection of where Africa is itself at that particular moment. That doesn't mean we don't still keep pushing for communism, pushing for socialism, pushing to politicize the people by any means necessary. But I guess for me, I still see it as a possible pathway, even if necessarily China isn't getting it right or whatever, or is necessarily not at a place where they're able to politically inspire Africa in any way when it comes to, like, some of their history with socialism, communism, whatever. Even if China isn't in the place to do that, I don't think that we as a people, or the way that the world is turning and capitalism is proving itself to be a bloodsucker, I don't think that it's impossible for China to move, not China, but Africa to move away from US imperialism and still not wake up to a particular consciousness to be able to tactfully use the resources that China has given them. I don't know, maybe I'm
because it's like
liberationist, but to me I just kind of see it as a process. I'm sorry, but
it's because it's like most people concur that since China is there on the continent, we can all agree it's there on the continent, that this is somehow driving out the West. So you don't think China there at all?
I didn't actually hear what you say. We can all.
I was saying that many people draw that since China is moving like industry and China is now on the continent, that means the West is now falling back from the continent, or the United States is falling back? Okay, so this is what I'm saying. This is why we shouldn't get caught up in the campist approach of one capitalist for another. You get what I'm saying? And it's one where we're basically pinned into a position into where we can operate off of, okay, China is opening mines. China has state-owned enterprises, in which the state-owned enterprise, I'm going to break it down like this. So it's in Tenke and Fugurume, which are two extraction sites within the DRC. You can look it up. And the TFM mine, that's what it's called. 80% of it is owned by CMOC, and then the other 20% is owned by Geka Mines. And I forgot to mention this about Joseph Kabila. He opened up this thing called Cycle Mines, which are also Chinese owned. But what ends up happening is it's an 80-20 split in which China gets most of the profits that come out of this industrial sector. And I think this is what I don't even think it's called a paradox, but this is the position that we're just pinned in. And now that I recognize that we're in this situation of being pinned in between the export capital of the world, China has $3 or $4 trillion in export capital. You know what I'm saying? I start to question China. Why don't you embargo Israel? Why are you Israel's second largest trading partner? I start to question this. If Turkey can embargo Israel, why can't you? Why can't you at least try to use your political leverage to agitate for at least one alleviation of what we're seeing in the world? Why do you, instead of withdrawing from the system and not even participating in it and not even being in the DRC in the first place, why do you even let your private companies, if you are a socialist, participate in this capitalist system of extraction for cobalt, tin, nickel, all of these other minerals? Why are you as a country sanctioning this as a socialist country and using state mandated violence from the Congolese National Police, which is in the West's back pocket, to protect your finance capital in these mines? And you're using these paramilitaries to clear people out for the construction of these mines. Because what most people don't understand is that this system of mining causes deforestation. You have to clear out all the trees because it's a system of digging. You got to dig for the minerals. So it's just one of those things that it's probably going to have to be a revisited conversation, because there is so much to it that people just don't know on both sides.
Absolutely. Listen, CJ, we appreciate you coming on and laying out. I think with these kind of conversations, for me, creating space for people to kind of lay out their arguments and so that we can base our responses and our study and our direction based off of what we said as opposed to what speculated. So I appreciate you coming on and lay that out. We do have, ample time, in the future to like keep coming having a conversation. There was a couple of things on our platform. Black Myths Podcast has had a conversation around breaking a myth that China is imperialist. So I can send that to you, and if you have a disagreement.
I shared it to him already.
Oh yeah, so if you have a disagreement or critique on those data points, I mean, it would be dope at some point to either publish it or share it or whatever. Because again, I don't want to like cut off dialogue and conversation, and people.
I think it's healthy.
Yeah, I want to promote that. So I thank you for coming on, being stand up and sharing your perspective and even sharing some sources. So I think that's very helpful. Cherie, you got anything, or CJ, you want to let us know about anything coming up?
Nah, not that much. I mean, I got a YouTube video discussing a lot of these things, and my YouTube is the same thing. I am CJ__2, discussing the topic: is China capitalist? Is it imperialist? Giving argumentation for both of those points. So yeah, that's just it. It's nothing like too major coming up, I'll say, other than just my TikTok, me just continuously posting on TikTok, me continuously streaming on Twitch. All my handles are the same. I am CJ__2. I actually type in the chat. So that's how you can keep up with me if you want to like learn more about these things. Cause I've also been able to connect with people from Future of the Congo about this specific topic.
You friends of the Congo you met?
Future of the Congo.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool. That's the best. All right, CJ, appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you soon, bro.
All right.
Yeah.
Peace.
All right. Episode 30 down. Conversation around China, Africa, and online dispersing debates. What you feeling? Cherie, thanks for facilitating that conversation and wanted to kind of bring that thing off of that line to maybe our space. So
Yeah, I think it was really important for me because I know, on this channel we have people that, are organizers working with the African China Solidarity and just super researchers on this station. So I feel like we needed to have kind of this TikTok left conversation be brought into the Black liberation media conversation, because I think, like I said, I mean, I'm still new to all these things. I still, for the most part, even after the stuff, of CJ, am kind of, I for whatever reason, I just still think that this is a process and I wouldn't view China as imperialist. I do want to be able to better explain this and stand on my statement. So I think it kind of pushes me more to just get to like, what is the real answer to this? Because I felt like on TikTok, people, like I said, once again, it's just everybody trying to one up each other. Nobody's really trying to get into like, what is the research, which CJ laid out, and how do we break down these things, through, outlets and journalists, and how do we actually break down this information that's put out here to lay out, a real stance? Because I think it really just, for us to, we have to push ourselves to have these kind of conversations, because if we don't, especially with talking to people that don't even align with any sort of leftist politic, we're not able to really give them something strong to stand on. If they can look at somebody like CJ, that's, like I said, a Marxist radical, whatever, and be able to be like, well, yeah, so China's bad, that means socialism's bad, and all these other things. I feel like we need to have these conversations and dissect them, and engage in this dialogue. And I feel like, yeah, I'm happy that I brought these points to Black liberation media so people can kind of begin to really think about what is put out there. And hopefully we can have a part 2 with like, maybe some people even from Black Myths, or people that, like I said, we may know from Black Agenda Report, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Carl Zai, who is a Chinese person who has very clear politics, would make sense, because I think people speculating about other things. So really quick, Jelly's Plum Crisp says Friends of Socialist China has a webinar coming up on the 21st. So maybe you and or CJ can tap into that. I do think it's like just important. I mean, you talked about this before. If Jerry said that he's teaching so-and-so about Vietnam and Cuba, I don't think that's enough of information to be like, oh yeah, they teaching that real shit over there, because you don't really know what he's teaching about Vietnam or Cuba. And so I think that's sometimes the draw on homiletics as people learn as preachers coming through a seminary school, but also just like a way to go viral and a way to give the audience information. And if you give people who don't know what you're talking about a bunch of information and names and points, all they're gonna do is think you know what you're talking about. They ain't really gonna be like, wait, slow the fuck down. Like, what? Who? So they're just hearing a bunch of things that they don't know nothing about. And so sometimes that could be a problem, because the people just saying this thing is legitimate, or a thing because it sounds like it's legitimate. And I just think it's important for us to remember that the United States it's just, the motherfuckers are diabolical. They have the ability to shift people's perception of everything and everyone. And so if the US media, including books of US media and politics, are all forms of miscommunication sharing, and when things make it to mainstream media, be it books, TikToks, videos, or whatever, the chances are it doesn't have, like the Vernon philosophy, it doesn't have the ingredients to actually give people the right analysis so that they can better organize and understand the world that they're in. And so again, I'm always asking other people to say, hey, when you get information, you're going to be talking and thinking in English more than likely. And I say this to people that I was talking to Spanish. And so in English, you should ask yourself, could this information be at all exploiting any racial divisions, especially among other countries who are fighting off in U.S. imperialism? And I'm putting a heavy emphasis on countries who have successfully fought off U.S. imperialism. I would be asking those questions about those informations before I go into examine those information. Because again, I think because of the advent of social media and other things like propaganda and lies can be spread even more rapidly. And as Nkrumah always talks about, neocolonialism is a mother, right? And it has the ability to dress liberal, conservative talking points into some radical aesthetics. I'm still dealing with, and I was in the U.S. I wasn't in the U.S. at the time, that like 49% of Americans will say that they don't trust the U.S. government with the spy balloon shit, right? But that means there's 51% actually believe it, and then even the 49% who say they don't trust America about spreading information about the spy balloon, that don't mean they trust China, because a large amount of them could still be impacted by the Red Scare and the anti-communist whatever. Like you still every day you can ride around in your city and you'll see that anti-Mao play or I don't know what it's this musical. I ain't never been to it, but it's like this musical, the anti-Mao musical.
The Sean, yeah. I didn't even. I'm just hearing more about that.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is like, yo, I don't know. I just think
that's a tricky part, and I saw that kind of came to be one of the conclusions. And I know CJ mentioned the future of Congo and like his relationship with them, and it's like I don't know. It's a tricky place because obviously, you don't want to crap on anybody's personal experience, but I just know historically, even when it comes to like Cubans that live in Cuba or were in Cuba, they'll have specific relationships, their stances against communism or against Fidel. And it's like, you can't tell. They'll be like, oh, you can't tell me because I was actually there. And then I think we turn around and we do the same thing with people in Africa. And it's not, and I know, I think it's hard to deal with stuff like that because we know racism is a thing. We know internalized racism is a thing. So I understand people not wanting to feel like African voices are being ignored. But I think we have to think if there's plenty of people in America that somewhat believe, the Democratic Party or whatever is this, that, and third, and a pathway to liberation or whatever, and they're in America and they feel like they have an understanding of it. I just wouldn't put it above people living in Africa, automatically having this deep analysis on what China has done to them or what China is doing to them. And yeah, if you get what I'm saying, like I just
doing with them or to them. Because I think
doing with them, So I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, just because a person lives in Africa or even is an organization in Africa, that they necessarily would be inherently the one to give the right breakdown of this. Because I know so many people living in America don't have a breakdown of geopolitical politics, and obviously people in Cuba may not have an actual breakdown.
There's African people and African businesses in China. Does that mean the country that person is from is controlling China?
You said what?
There's African people with African businesses in China.
Yes.
Does that mean that country that person's from is controlling China?
Yeah, it doesn't. So that's the tricky part. That's why we can't really go off of anybody, or think just because a person is from a place or a group is from a place that they necessarily understand it on a larger scale. And I think that's the tricky part, because I feel like historically when I've had discussions on that, somebody would be like, aha, this person in Africa said that this is the deal, and there's somebody from the continent living there, so they gotta know. And so I just think, I think that can be a hard thing to kind of overcome as well when we talk about trying to break down the actual politics of a place.
Yeah, there was a point where somebody was saying something about, because I do think, I don't know if we all have the same definition of things, but somebody said that next time we should have the guest. And I think I was trying to, but I didn't explicitly ask for the definition. But maybe we should have the guests, Arowello. Please have guests define the terms they use. Maybe he is using the term imperialism loosely. Like I felt like communism, imperialism, all of those was kind of used loosely, and that even capitalism kind of felt loosely. I don't know, because again, I think the process that it takes to build a thing, is just, I'm only, I think I'm 41. I'll be 42 soon, and the world has been here a long time, and I know CJ is quite younger, and I just don't know that we have enough life experience to know and understand people's dynamics, especially not visiting, not engaging, whatever. And it's not hard for me to look into the context of this book, who, what, and the politics around it, to kind of get rationally what was the political objective of it. And I think, again, that's why it's easy for me to ground the conversation in something that we watch or read together and then dialogue from there, because if not, we're going to get a bunch of words, a bunch of names, bunch of things, and like very little sources that you can interrogate, especially if you can interrogate it real time. So if CJ had mentioned something that I have read or I have engaged, then I could be like,
and I apologize for that, because he did bring up that book, but I think I just shared the articles because I thought we would focus more on that, but we were just talking and it got more.
Oh yeah, that would have been perfect.
I could have done better, because I guess, I don't know. I think I just was thinking we would kind of still tie it more to the articles than the book that he brought up, but we should have kind of, so that's my bad. I'm sorry. I'm still new to this, my guy. Sorry.
That's so good. So good. Nah, man. Nah. So yeah, I appreciate the dialogue. If anything, it's in the future when we are building, I think the thing about recording is you cannot say that you didn't say what was said on the video for all of us. So as we build, like, we can correct as we go on. David, the book was what is it? Cobalt Red?
Red Cobalt.
Cobalt Red.
Oh,
Cobalt Red. How the blood of the Congo power our lives. And again, there was as people would argue, there's a good testament to understand how phones and technology and things work, but there is an argument that there was a little bit, if not a lot, of misreading of China's interaction with the continent. But yeah, man. So anything you got coming up this week? I know there's a lot of events and PE shit going down out here. So what you got going on?
Chad, I gotta learn this show again. That's really my thing, is trying to memorize this show all over again. So that's pretty much what I kind of need to dedicate a lot of my time to. It's coming up in 3 weeks, so I didn't put everything in here today, but I don't know if we can probably drop it in the chat again afterwards or whatever. But yeah, y'all know we're doing the Cultural Workers Got Something to Say, October 3rd to October 5th in Atlanta, Georgia. So, thank you. I am Manifesto. Thank you. But yeah, so I'm just gonna be, I'm gonna be out here trying to learn this show again. So. But I mean, I've done it 6 times before, and I need to update some of the wording, because as I evolve, the show evolves. So I have to take time to figure out what I may want to change, keep in, switch out a bit. So I'm just trying to let y'all know a little bit about the process, but that's what I have kind of coming up personally. I was supposed to be on Moose and them's podcast, not podcast, radio show next week. But I think we may be changing the date, so I don't want to put anything out there, but those who follow me, I'll announce when I'm going to be on for that. But yeah, everything is pushing the show, and happy to have the CMB political education squad supporting me. Geechee's coming on as stage manager, so we just got to still figure out some more things with that as far as getting everything prepared. Yeah,
I'm stage manager.
Yes, you agreed to be stage manager. What you talking about?
I thought I was participating in the conversation. I didn't know I was doing both of them. Lord Jesus. Everybody sit the fuck down.
I literally asked you. You're like, fine.
Man, I ain't know what I was signing up for. But yeah, so yeah, also again on the 30th at Create ATL, we'll have Brian Quoba in conversation with myself and Tricia from BAP, the oral historian who was on last week. So if you're in the area out in West Atlanta, come through. And then the following event on the 30th of the next month, October, we'll be having a conversation on Morehouse campus with Jennifer Black, Noel Hanahan, and a couple other notable people around. But yeah, stay tuned, and we appreciate y'all.
Wait, I just want to respond to this comment really quick that David was like, maybe I could do the show on BLM someday, and you can donate and pay me. David Silber, he's like, maybe I can do the show on BLM one day, and we can donate and pay her. Yeah. I just wanted to respond. I don't do stuff like that. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm a theater head. If you want to see the show, you need to see it in person. So I can come to you wherever you live, wherever your organization, school is. They can contact me, but I don't do theater for film purposes. I have a recording that is only for me and possible schools and administrators and other places that may want to put it on. But as far as for public view, very traditional with that. I don't do that. You gotta see it in the flesh. Sorry.
You think going on some bitch ass TV show gonna make you some kind of hero?
Ain't going on your TV show, David. Okay. All right, man. Listen, I appreciate y'all. See y'all next week. Same time, same place. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Peace, y'all.